Every day when a man comes home, his wife pretends to be dead, and each time she tears her hair is very special. Today she is bitten to death by a crocodile. Tomorrow she is shot to death by arrows, and the day after that she is the gang leader stabbed to death. The first time she pretends to be dead, her husband is frightened by her, and even shouts in pain that he will not live anymore. When his wife sees her husband in shock, she will starve to death beside him. It is not that she laughs at her husband's cowardice, but she feels happy from the bottom of her heart that her lover cares about her so much. The husband does not understand why his wife does this, but every time she just smiles and is unwilling to explain. He thinks that his wife may be bored at home and her mood will return to normal in a few days, but he did not expect that his wife would become more and more violent, and the law enforcement is getting more and more bizarre. Over time, the props used to pretend to be dead filled a bag of garbage that he threw downstairs. However, Tong was misunderstood as a pervert by the neighbors, and they shouted that they would call the police to arrest him. He was so confused that he couldn't go to work normally. In order to find out the reason why his wife pretended to be dead, he simply cooperated with his wife and acted with him. He thought that maybe he was too busy at work and his wife needed some company and care. He would stop playing after enough fun, but he never expected that his wife would prepare a script for him when she saw his cooperation. He had to perform it according to the lines, one by one. As time went on, Jia-hei was exhausted both physically and mentally. Not to mention that he didn't find out the reason why his wife pretended to be dead. Dong-shi saw that he was so distressed, so she asked Jia-hei to bring his wife to have dinner together in the evening so that his wife would have no time to implement the plan of pretending to be dead. After arriving at a restaurant, everyone had a great time chatting. His colleagues were curious about how they got together, but Qianhui said,
強いて言えば半分こできるからね。半分こ?
Qianhui explained that when they were dating, she got separated from her husband on the street while looking for a delicious ice cream. Jia-hei searched for a long time before finally finding her. He didn't scold or blame her, and even gave her the bigger half of the ice cream. Although splitting it in half wasn't exactly even, Jia-hei felt that this was the right thing to do. It was this kind of seemingly ordinary little thing that made Qianhui feel so warm inside, which is why she resolutely decided to marry Jia-hei. Seeing the happiness on his wife's face, Jia-hei's previous worries melted away, and it was also the first time he learned the reason his wife chose to marry him.
嬉しくて、そのことばっかり覚えてた。
私は探せば必ず見つかりますから。
Just then, an incredibly huge moon appeared in the night sky. Qianhui suddenly said, "The moonlight is so beautiful." Jia-hei simply thought it was an involuntary sigh from his wife and didn't give it much thought. After that night, they enjoyed a few rare days of peace. However, it wasn't long before his wife started her nonsensical pretend to be dead antics again. This time, she pretended to be a resurrected pharaoh. Jia-hei really didn't know how to play along anymore. To put an end to his wife's fake death games, Jia-hei decided to have her find a job. In his view, his wife's strange behavior lately was simply because she'd been cooped up at home for too long. Faced with Jia-hei's annoyance, a glint flashed in Qianhui's eyes. Although she felt disappointed, she still respected her husband's decision. The next day, she found a part-time job at a laundromat. The owner was an elderly man living alone, but after a long day at work, she came home and pretended she had been strangled by a robber because stores with few people are more likely to be robbed, and working at a laundromat, she might really encounter such a situation.
クリーニング屋さんにそんな命の危険はありません。
Her husband's patience was worn thin by her behavior. He couldn't stand being busy at work and then coming home to play these boring games with his wife.
ふりはもう飽きたよ。
Her husband's words left her feeling hurt. That night, as she lay beside him, she said again, "The moonlight is so beautiful." Jia-hei was already exhausted and really didn't want to guess at the meaning behind her words anymore. He thought that after he had bluntly told her how much he hated her pretending to be dead, she would feel sad and restrain herself. However, Qianhui misunderstood what he meant. That night, she chose to dress up as a ghost to scare Jia-hei, thinking that this wouldn't count as pretending to be dead.
死んだふりじゃないじゃん。
Her husband felt both exasperated and amused, but he was at a loss for what to do. Since hurtful words didn't work, he decided to buy cake and flowers to cheer Qianhui up. As expected, Qianhui was very touched and hugged Jia-hei tightly, promising that she wouldn't scare him anymore. But to his surprise, the very next morning, his wife started pretending to be Ultraman. Admittedly, this wasn't meant to scare him. It was just her behavior. Jia-hei was completely overwhelmed. In anger, he tore off his wife's mask and demanded that she explain why she kept pretending to be dead, but his wife still refused to give an explanation. After Jia-hei left, Qianhui went alone to a slide, gazing at the sky for a long time, as if she was recalling something sad. That night, when Jia-hei returned home, Qianhui didn't continue pretending to be dead. Instead, she was nowhere to be found. Jia-hei searched for a long time, before finally spotting a tail behind the curtains. She had disguised herself as a stray cat, hoping her husband would understand the feelings of someone who is lost and helpless. But Jia-hei had long grown weary of this kind of life.
言いたいことあるなら言ってよ。
perhaps feeling that he had been too harsh. After dinner, Jia-hee cleaned up the table by himself, hoping to take the opportunity to talk with his wife about why she kept pretending to be dead. But his wife countered by asking if he still remembered the promise they made when they got married. Only then did Jia-hee recall that at their wedding, his wife hadn't asked for anything. She just made him promise that he must never die before she did. Jia-hee still found this request inexplicable to this day, but his wife insisted it carried deep meaning. The next morning, Chen-hui went to work at the dry cleaner as usual, but as soon as she opened the door, she saw the boss kneeling on the ground. One of the pair of birds he kept had died, which made him very sad because the pair had been a gift from his late wife. Now, with only one left, its loneliness seemed to mirror his own in old age. The boss continued, saying that birth, aging, sickness, and death are all part of life, and that no one knows which will come first, an accident or tomorrow. Seeing how upset he was, Qianhui smeared mud on her own face, hoping to cheer up the old man in this way. Sure enough, the boss was amused and laughed. As he wiped the mud off her face, he told Qianhui, "If you don't have children yet, be sure to cherish and value the time you spend with your partner. Because in the long river of time, there is actually no such thing as forever. All gatherings are only temporary. Only separation is the destined ending." The old man's words left Qianhui deep in thought for a long time. That night, she played games with her husband once again. Seeing him like this, Jia and Niutu quietly left. But Qianhui hurriedly called them back because today he didn't seem like his usual self as her husband.
2050年から来た62歳の知恵です。
He was pretending to be his future, elderly self, but Jia-hee didn't understand the meaning behind it. Although he found it a bit boring, he still firmly told his wife that even if she grew old and became an old lady, he would still love her.
知恵が好きだよ。これからもずっと一緒にいたい。
ありがとうございます。
もうこんなことやめようよ。言いたいことがあるなら、はっきり言えばいい。こうやって責められるの辛いよ。
Instead, she walked to the side and started doing the math. If they could live to 80, then the days they could spend together would only be 41 years left, which is 14,965 days. That's 359,160 hours, and every minute and every second that has passed can never be relived. Jia-hee still didn't realize what Qianhui was thinking, and instead asked her what the purpose of doing this was. Qianhui still didn't answer. She just walked to the window, gazed at the moon, and said something.
日が綺麗ですね。
Her abnormal behavior put a lot of pressure on Jia-hee. He couldn't figure out why his wife was pretending to be dead. He couldn't understand the deeper meaning of the words. The more it seems real, the more beautiful it is. So he asked a colleague out to drink away his worries. After a few drinks, Jia-hee had a bit too much. His wife drove over to pick him up, and when she saw her husband drunk, she wasn't angry at all. She took her husband and started wandering around the streets, seemingly with no intention of going home.
今のまっすぐじゃなかった？
いつもみたいに寝ててください。
だっていつもすっごい時間かかるからさ。
大丈夫です。
He didn't know that his wife was doing this, so he could sleep a bit more in the car. She understood how heavy the burdens of being a man could be. Perhaps home couldn't really help him relax. Only in the car after a long night of drinking could her husband truly sleep soundly. The next day, the husband suddenly wanted to go out with his wife. He really didn't want his wife to be too idle and end up doing something bizarre like pretending to be dead again. His wife readily agreed. However, at that moment, they suddenly received a call from their hometown. His wife's father had suffered a sudden heart attack and was still being resuscitated in the hospital. Jia-hee didn't hesitate for a second. He immediately took his wife and boarded the bus back to their hometown. Along the way, memories from the past flooded his mind. Years ago, his wife's mother had died suddenly in an accident. As a child, she experienced the pain of losing a loved one for the first time. Watching her father consumed by grief, she felt utterly powerless. Now, her only remaining family member was also fighting for his life. She was truly terrified that her father might leave her as well. When they arrived at the hospital, fortunately, her father had been rescued in time and was no longer in critical condition. Only then did her heart finally settle.
もういけませんね。さんの家族、私だけですからね。
At that moment, Chihui's eyes were filled with concern. She grabbed her father's hand and was just about to call out his name, but unexpectedly, her father was only pretending. In fact, he had already woken up and just wanted to scare his daughter a little. Chihui smiled and complained to her father, telling him not to joke like that. Afterwards, she made an excuse to go handle the hospital admission procedures and walked out of the room. But as soon as she stepped out the door, she leaned against the wall and broke down in tears, covering her face. She was truly terrified. Terrified of losing her father, her only family. Just as Jia-hee was about to comfort his wife, he suddenly spoke up.
約束覚えてますか？
覚えてるよ。
絶対に私より先に死なないでくださいね。
The sound of sobbing reached the hospital room. The father told Jia-hee that the last time he saw his daughter cry like this was when her mother passed away. That year, Chihui was only 5 years old. She kept calling out for her mother by her side, but her mother never responded again. Since then, the father had to be both dad and mom. He was deeply afraid that Chihui would lack a mother's love, so no matter how busy he was at work, he would always try to make time to be with her. However, the father himself also couldn't bear the loss of his wife. Every night, after coaxing Chihui to sleep, he would sit and stare blankly at his wife's portrait for a long time. The sound of sobbing would often wake Chihui up. Seeing her father's lonely figure, Chihui always wanted to do something for him. One day after that, her father came home and found that Chihui was missing. He searched the rooms for a long time before finally finding his daughter in the closet. 5-year-old Chihui was pretending to be a ninja, hoping to cheer her father up in this way.
から毎日かくれんぼ疲れてんのになんでこんなことするんだってもう腹立ってさ
Kaga understood her father's feelings all too well and even burst out laughing. The father continued speaking. At first he was very angry too, but after he got used to this kind of life, he suddenly started to look forward to coming home. What will my daughter dress up as today? Where will she hide this time? In this way, Chihui gradually opened up her father's heart. Even though it was really boring, the father still couldn't help but laugh at the way his daughter acted. He understood that his daughter just wanted to make him happy. Although Chihui was just a child at the time, her father knew very well that even at 5 years old, she already understood that people could die and that those left behind would be very sad. The father's words made Kaga suddenly realize something, and he began to understand his wife a little better. Perhaps the reason Chihui spent so much time acting every day wasn't because she was too idle or bored, but simply because she wanted to use this way to make her busy self a little happier. But for her to switch from acting to playing dead, there must be a deeper meaning behind it. That night, the two of them returned to the room where his wife had lived as a child. By chance, the husband noticed a book. When he opened it, he saw that the words, "The moon is beautiful tonight," were written inside, and in that moment, he was completely stunned. It turned out that the phrase, "The moon is beautiful tonight," was a romantic translation of "I love you" by the famous writer Natsume Soseki. Its true meaning was actually "I love you." The weight that had been pressing on Kaga's heart was finally lifted. In that instant, he understood the truth behind his wife's feigned death, and he also realized the depth of her intentions. Just how much does he love himself? On the second day, he invited his wife to the place where he had proposed to her. Memories of the past resurfaced before his eyes. On the day he proposed 3 years ago, he had barely prepared anything. He simply blurted out, "Please marry me," without much thought. He hadn't meant to be so abrupt. It was just something he had kept in his heart that slipped out unintentionally. But his wife hugged him tightly, repeating over and over.
月が綺麗ですね。
Reflecting on the past 3 years, he finally understood the meaning behind those words. Looking at his wife, he suddenly said,
どうして私が死んだふりしていたか。
これは多分だけどさ、結婚っていうのはさ
He would come upstairs and apologize to his wife. She shouldn't have thought he was too virtuous and was angry with him for guessing what he meant by that. Now he finally understood. His wife was just too shy to say the 3 words, "I love you," directly. So whenever she expressed her love to Jiahei, she would say, "It's beautiful to die," instead. He loved Jiahei, but at the same time, he was afraid of losing him. Now that some misunderstandings were resolved, the wife suddenly asked her husband. A spring breeze arose, and her husband's voice was carried away by the breeze. In fact, by the time he asked, by the time he answered, everything had already been answered. The wife may not have heard a word, but she believed her husband. The answer must be the one that satisfies him most. He smiles with happiness. In fact, the husband also understands the truth of the matter when he is chatting alone with his father. His wife pretends to be dead every day just to let her husband adapt to her departure in advance. Because everyone will die, and the one left behind will be very sad. He will first understand the feeling of heartbreak. So if her husband adapts to his departure, he will not be so sad on the day of separation. If he collapses beside her and cries, perhaps at that time he will not be able to distinguish between reality and real life. Like and follow us to watch the next video together.